What happened on a cold night on February 24th, 1978 that caused 5 friends to just go missing after attending a basketball game in Chico, California? Gary Mathias, Bill Sterling, Ted Weir, Jackie Hewitt, and Jack Madruga were all known as the Yuba County Five. This group of 5 friends, often referred to as just the boys in the small town of Marysville, California, just outside of Yuba City, were all playing on a basketball team called the Gateway Gators in a community-sponsored program called the Gateway Projects. Each of the men was very excited, as the following Saturday they all intended to play in a regional tournament for the Special Olympics. But before that, they had even bigger plans to go see their favorite basketball team, the UC Davis Aggies, take on the Chico State Wildcats. The boys all piled into Jack Madruga's prized possession 1969 Mercury Montego, making one last stop in the Yuba City area to get gas at Bill Sterling's parents' gas station, where Bill also got his weekly allowance. Then the boys headed up the road for their 1-hour trip north to Chico, California to see the game. From several accounts, it is known the boys made it to the basketball game, including an account from a man who worked for the local Chico Enterprise Record newspaper, who recalled that the boys sat just a few rows in front of him. He also recalled not witnessing anything suspicious while the boys were at the game, and was pretty confident that they stayed for the duration of the game. Just after the conclusion of the game, the boys must have been in high spirits, as their UC Davis Aggies secured a rare road win over the Chico State Wildcats. As soon as the boys exited the parking lot, they went a few blocks over to Bears Market to get a few snacks for their hour drive south back home to the Marysville area. The woman working at Bears Market that night recalled the boys just coming in right at closing time. She remembered that the boys were in high spirits, but also resented them for coming in so close to closing, as it would take her a little bit longer that night to get the store fully closed down. That was the last time anyone would have talked to the boys, as they never made it home to the Marysville area that evening. Their families became concerned as it became the early morning hours, and there was still no sign of their loved ones. Each family began making phone calls to other families to see if they had heard anything about the boys' whereabouts. When all the boys failed to show up at a local store the next morning to meet up to go to their Special Olympics regional basketball tournament, the authorities were called in and the search began. A few days later, on Tuesday, February 28th, authorities found Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego halfway up a mountain road in an area called the Rogers Cow Camp Campground in the Plumas National Forest. The car only contained some wrappers from the snacks the boys bought. A few maps were still folded in the glove box, with one of the windows rolled down, but there was no sign of the boys. The authorities were baffled to find out that the car still had a quarter of a tank of gas left in it, and appeared to have been briefly stuck in a snowdrift, but not to the point to where 5 grown men could not have easily have pushed the car out. The police then hotwired the car, which started up immediately, indicating there was nothing wrong mechanically with the car. The location where the car was found was more than an hour and a half off the boys' course that they would have taken to get back home to the Marysville area. There would have been no reason whatsoever why the boys, who had an important basketball game to play the next day, would have been so far off course. Adding to the building mystery was that after authorities drove Jack Madruga's car back to the Oroville area, they noticed that there was no damage to the underside of the car, including on its low-hanging muffler, which was quite surprising, being that the road they were on was heavily rutted. This told the authorities that the person that drove that car up the road must have been familiar with it. This made no sense to the families, as they said none of the boys would have been familiar with that road. In particular, Jack Madruga, who was the driver and owner of the car, and was also said to never let anyone else ever drive it. Heavy snowfall continued in the area where the car was found, making search efforts more difficult. Not one sign of the boys was seen anywhere. Approximately 2 weeks went by when there was a possible break in the case, when a man named Joseph Shones came forward claiming to have seen the boys on the night they went missing. Shones, a 55-year-old resident of Berry Creek, California, just an hour south of where Jack Madruga's car was located, Shones claimed he had driven up the road to check the snowpack near a cabin he owned for an upcoming ski weekend he planned to spend with his wife and daughter. Shones in the process got stuck in his Volkswagen Beetle. After getting stuck, he tried to push his car out and in the process suffered a mild heart attack. Now in a good amount of pain, Shones was able to get back into his car to stay warm. What seemed to him to be several hours later, sometime around midnight, he recalled seeing headlights coming up behind him and a vehicle stopping approximately 20 yards away from him. A few individuals looked like they got out of the car as Shones could see the people backlit by their headlights. He managed to get out of his car and call out to them for help. None of the people responded. They all seemed to get back into the car and the headlights suddenly went out. Shones then went back into his car to stay warm, laying down for what seemed like another 3 or so hours until he saw flashlight beams outside of his car. Shones again got out of his car and saw what he thought were at least 5 people standing around the vehicle. One looked like a woman holding a baby. He then cried out for help and no one responded. The flashlight beams suddenly went away and the people were gone just as soon as they appeared. Now angered by the fact that the people he saw would not come to his aid, Shones got back into his car until it finally ran out of gas and no longer able to provide him any heat. He then decided to walk back down the road 5 miles to the Mountain House Lodge where he had stopped on his way up. On his walk back down, he passed Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego and noticed that no one was inside. He did not remember if the keys were inside the car or not. When he arrived at the Mountain House Lodge, Shones says that he was given a ride to the hospital in Oroville, where it was later confirmed that he indeed suffered from a heart attack. Another possible eyewitness account of the boys came from a woman in the town of Brownsville, California, an hour-and-a-half drive south from where Jack Madruga's car was abandoned. She claimed she recognized the boys from a reward poster that she had seen earlier in the day. She claimed the boys had pulled up at the convenience store in a red truck, with some of them getting out and going into the store to buy some items, while 2 of the boys went to a phone booth to attempt to make a phone call. The owner of the store corroborated this account by also adding that he had seen the boys on both the Saturday after they had originally gone missing and the following Sunday. The police felt the woman's account and the account from the store owner were both credible. The families of the boys were suspicious of this account as their reward had been recently posted and they were afraid that people coming forward were simply after the reward money. They also could not understand why they would have driven an hour-and-a-half south in a vehicle other than Jack Madruga's car. As investigators were told that Gary Mathias had friends in the adjacent town of Forbestown, this fact made the investigators take the accounts from the store owner and the woman even more seriously, prompting an even more detailed search of that area. Additionally, Gary's friends in Forbestown were contacted and they claimed they had not seen him for well over a year. The searching continued for the boys, but was extremely limited due to heavy snowfall in the area. It was clear to investigators that they were just going to have to wait for the snow to thaw out. With no new information coming forward about the boys, the families were all under the impression that foul play must have been involved. "They've just disappeared from the face of the earth," remarked Jack Madruga's mother, Melba. 100 agonizing days went by since the boys from Yuba County went missing, with their families not getting any answers. The long, excruciating wait for answers would suddenly be over on Sunday, June 4, 1978, when a small group of recreational motorcycle riders happened upon an abandoned U.S. Forest Service trailer camp in a cul-de-sac just beyond a grove of trees. It was not unusual for a Forest Service station in a remote area to be unmanned, as some of them were only used when needed for wildfire spotting and an occasional search and rescue mission. It was sunny that day, and starting to get warm as the sun was beating down on the beautiful landscape in the mountains. The group had been riding for the better part of the day and decided to take a break by pulling off of the main road and into the deserted camp. The camp consisted of one larger main trailer that was 60 feet long and was surrounded by 4 smaller trailers. The camp was located in an area called the Daniel Zink Campgrounds. One of the motorcycle riders removed his helmet and inhaled a nauseating, putrid smell that seemed to be coming from the main trailer. Thinking the smell must be from a dead animal close by, the man noticed a broken window on the main trailer and decided to see what was inside. What the man saw through the window would be not only the beginning of finding answers to this case, but also the beginning of an avalanche of new questions that still go unanswered over 40 years later. What the man saw through the window was the emaciated body of Ted Weir lying face up with his hands on his chest. Both of his pants legs were rolled up above his knees, revealing apparent blood poisoning and gangrene. He had frozen to death. The motorcycle riders left the camp and reported what they found. Several bed sheets had been pulled over Ted Weir's body up to his chin. His leather shoes were off his feet and missing. Ted Weir's feet were severely frostbitten and were giving way to gangrene. 5 of Ted's toes were missing due to the severe frostbite. One of the first indicators to police that someone other than Ted Weir was in the trailer was the fact that he could not have pulled the bed sheets over himself, as it would have been simply too painful with his feet in that condition. A table by the bed had his ring with Ted engraved on it, his gold necklace, his wallet with cash inside, and a gold Waltham watch with its crystal missing. The families all stated that the watch did not belong to any of the 5 men. A single partially melted candle was also on the table, the only known source of light and heat in the trailer. Adding to the building mystery was the fact that several paperback books and furniture was in the trailer that could have been used to build a fire to stay warm against the bitter mountain cold. Matches were also found in the trailer that Ted could have used. In the shed outside, there was a full propane tank that, if only switched on, would have provided heat to the trailer. Despite being 5'11" and 200 pounds at the time he went missing, Ted Weir had lost from 80 to 100 pounds. It had been determined by a Plumas County pathologist that based on the growth of his beard on his face, that Ted had lived in starving agony in the trailer from 8 to 13 weeks before he succumbed to exposure, just 2 weeks before his body was found. Also at Ted's disposal in the trailer were extra blankets, extra clothing, and plenty of food. As explained by Deputy Sheriff Dennis Versino of the Plumas County Sheriff's Department in the June 13th Napa County Register, either Ted Weir or another of the victims busted into a shed outside and got the sea rations. 3 cases were completely consumed. Each case contains 12 individual meals, things like stew, can of crackers, can of fruit. A total of 36 meals were eaten. Next to where the sea rations were was an unlocked cabinet with enough dehydrated meals to last an army, said another deputy. The meals were opened with an Army P38 can opener. The only 2 men who knew how to use this type of can opener were Jack Madruga and Gary Mathias, as they had both served in the Army. This was further evidence that at least Gary Mathias was in the trailer for some time with Ted Weir. As some of the tragic pieces to the puzzle were starting to come into place, the nightmare of discovering the full depth of their suffering during their fight for survival was only just the beginning. After the discovery of Ted Weir's body on Sunday, June 4th, a massive search was launched in the immediate area around the Forest Service camp. On Tuesday, June 6th, the bodies of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga were found 4.5 miles short of the trailer on opposite sides of the mountain road that led to the trailer. Jack Madruga's body was found near a stream. The bodies of both Sterling and Madruga were both badly ravaged by wild animals. Bill Sterling's skull was found 50 yards away from the rest of his body. Madruga's right arm had been bitten off. He was found lying on his side, clutching his watch in his left hand. Madruga's car keys were in his pants pocket. Sheriff Versino was the first person to find Bill Sterling's body 15 feet off the road. Jim Sterling, Bill Sterling's father, was the second person on the scene. Sterling's father asked the sheriff how he knew that it was his son's body he had found, and the sheriff replied, "Sir, we found the wallet. It has the pictures." He was talking about a photo of Bill Sterling's twin sisters and his social security card. With his worst fears now confirmed, Jim Sterling broke down and began sobbing as he fell to his knees. Jackie Hewitt's body was found the next day, June 7th, 2.5 miles from the trailer by his brother-in-law, who was taking part in the search. Wild animals had scattered his remains. His skull was found 100 yards from the rest of his body. In the July 6, 1978 article in the Washington Post titled, "5 Boys Who Never Come Back," it was reported that Jackie Hewitt's father found his son's backbone. It further stated that Lieutenant Ayres tried to talk to the elder Hewitt out of taking part of the search, fearing something like this may happen, but he insisted. Part of the mystery was finally over. Despite continued searches of the area, the body of Gary Mathias was never found, and he is still listed as missing to this day. Gary's father-in-law, Robert Clough, was sure that the searchers would eventually find Gary's thick-rimmed glasses, as an animal would not eat them, according to Clough. Gary's family was as distraught as the other families, and they still had no answers as to what may have happened to him. Investigators had their work cut out for them to figure out how the Yuba County Five made it so far up the mountain, wearing street clothes in freezing temperatures with no jackets and 3 to 6 foot snow drifts, and why they left their perfectly running car. As cold as it must have been, they probably just got tired and wanted to lay down and go to sleep, said Deputy Dennis Versino. If you let yourself do that, well... A day before the boys went missing, a U.S. Forest Service snowcat, a vehicle used to make pathways into snow-covered areas, was driven to the trailer camp so a Forest Service worker could get the snow off the main trailer roof so it would not collapse. It was believed that the boys found the now-packed path made by the snowcat, believing it would take them to shelter not too far away. It was further believed by investigators that Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling succumbed to hypothermia halfway to the trailer. So many questions still lingered. It was speculated that one reason the available food was not taken to eat in the trailer camp was that the boys thought it was stealing and thought they would eventually get in trouble if they took more of it. The fact that Ted Weir did not appear to make any attempt to make a fire was not very strange, as his brother Dallas Weir had told of an incident when their house caught on fire and they had to wake Ted up as he was refusing to leave the house as he had to work the next day. That would still not explain why Gary Mathias did not make a fire or attempted to eat the rest of the food, or turn on the gas to the trailer. Gary was the most intelligent of the group, as he was not intellectually challenged, like the other men, but he did suffer from schizophrenia. As Gary Mathias was known to have a violent past, including an incident where he punched a police officer and another incident of an attempted rape on his cousin's wife, it was speculated that he may have stopped taking his schizophrenia medication and simply had an episode, resulting in the deaths of his 4 mentally handicapped friends. But that scenario does not make total sense, as it was well known that Gary Mathias was just as excited to play in the regional basketball tournament the next day as the rest of the boys. It was also confirmed by Gary's doctors that he had not had many episodes whatsoever in the years leading up to his disappearance, as he was doing very well on his medication and considered by his doctors to be a success story in controlling his schizophrenia. Furthermore, it was noted that Gary's tennis shoes were found in the trailer. It was surmised by authorities that he possibly took Ted Weir's sturdier leather shoes and left his own at the trailer and ventured out on his own after Ted Weir finally passed away. It would not be in any doubt that Gary Mathias was definitely suffering from the effects of not being on his medication for so long, if he did survive weeks, such as Ted did. This was a brief synopsis of the story of the Yuba County Five. My name is Drew Beeson, and the author of the upcoming book, Out of Bounds, What Happened to the Yuba County Five. I am also the author of a book called Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer, and a book about D.B. Cooper called Paratrooper of Fortune. In my other books, I always try to bring more to a story and just not retell what other people have already done. And that's the same with this case on the Yuba County Five. There is so much more to this story that people don't know. I have spoken with family members of the Yuba County Five, and they told me what they believe possibly happened to their loved ones that night on February 24th, 1978. I've also read almost every printed newspaper article on this case, and I can tell you that there are a lot of inaccuracies in the newspaper reporting. One of the inaccuracies has to deal with where Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego was abandoned and the distance from where that car was abandoned to the trailer camp where Ted Weir's body was found. Almost all reports have anywhere from 19 to 20 miles. And I can tell you that the distance is much shorter than that. I have a map in my book. Even if you followed the road around from where the car was abandoned and the Rogers Cow Camp up until the U.S. Forest Service trailer camp where the trailer was, it is not that far away. Now, why would that mistake been made and printed so many times from the 19 to 20 miles? Well, it could be that the investigating authorities needed a reason for why they didn't find the trailer quicker than they did, because they possibly could have got there in time and saved at least Ted Weir, possibly one of the other boys. Now, it probably are correct that 2 or 3 of them died on the way to the trailer from hypothermia, because even a 10-mile hike in those kind of conditions uphill would have been very daunting, to say the least. But then again, it's just one of those inaccuracies you'll find in some of the reporting. It was also believed by some of the families that the authorities could have done more, and that the authorities had refused the help of the U.S. Forest Service department to help them look for the boys. So that has been printed in one of the newspapers. Also, what do we really know about the principal witness in this case, Joseph Shones? There's a lot that is not known about this guy, and I spoke with someone that knew him, and tells a lot of interesting things about Mr. Shones and his credibility issues. We'll just say that. It was known at the time that Mr. Shones did change his story at least a few times, and he accredited it to the fact that he may have been hallucinating as he was in so much pain. One addition that Mr. Shones added to the story, as you have heard in the reenactment of this story, that he claimed after seeing the first vehicle come up behind him around midnight, that he also possibly saw a red truck behind that first vehicle. I think that was on his first sighting. He added that detail later, and I believe he added that detail after hearing the account from the woman in Brownsville who said she saw a red pickup truck in Brownsville in front of the convenience store. So I think Mr. Shones was just making his story a little more believable by adding the detail of the red truck. He also said that when he was taken back to the Mountain House, that he was driven directly to the hospital in Oroville. In another account, Shones says that he was given a ride home from Mountain House, and then his wife took him to the hospital. So there are many different little tweaks here and there in Mr. Shones' story. He also claimed that he was sitting in his Volkswagen Beetle for heat, and anyone that knows a Volkswagen Beetle, when they're not moving, since it's an air-cooled engine, does not hardly give off any heat whatsoever, unless you had an upgraded heater in the car somehow, which maybe he had, but there are a lot of inaccuracies in his story. I also discuss the possibility that a fight happened at Bears Market after the boys got their snacks directly after the basketball game. This is believed by at least 2 of the families, or believed to be at some point there was a fight after the boys left that market, and it started with them picking on another group of men, picking on Jackie Hewitt, and then Gary, as the protector of the group, came to Jackie's defense, as Gary was no stranger to fighting, as he had been in many barroom brawls, according to the police. Maybe they were picking on the boys because they were in Chico State territory. Those guys were obviously UC Davis fans, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. I can tell you that 2 of the families believe there was a brawl that night, and that the boys were possibly followed, and it could have caused that. So that is going to get explored in my book as well. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm going to leave it all up to the reader, but I can tell you that at least 2 of the families believe that's a possibility, that there was indeed a fight in the parking lot of Bears Market. I can also tell you that the families think another individual that's still alive may have been responsible for what happened to the boys, and this is not Gary Mathias. This is another individual. I'll talk about that as well. Some of the family members do think Gary was possibly involved, because Gary wasn't, exactly very, accepted by the other families, as he was different from the other boys. And the main reason he was going to the Gateway Projects program is because he was getting drug counseling, because Gary Mathias had drug issues in the past. Not only taking his medication for schizophrenia, but he'd also had drug issues in the past. And the Gateway Projects were just not for mentally handicapped, but they did drug counseling and different things like that. So that's also going to be explored. There's also a fairly credible sighting of Gary Mathias by a family member of one of the missing Yuba County Five boys after they went missing, and that's going to get explored as well. One thing I will state unequivocally is that this just wasn't a group of retarded boys who simply got lost. From talking to the families in my own research, they definitely had enough sense to turn the car around if they were lost. Specifically, Jack Madruga definitely knew when he was lost, and to just turn the car around and go back down that mountain road. The families, without a doubt, believe that something forced them out of that car and up that mountain. No doubt about it. So please check out my book. It'll be out on Amazon soon. And please like and subscribe to this channel if you like what you heard. Thank you.